This should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential area.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are rocking with the best, nothing less than dress for success. Welcome to Fourth and Frames. I am Redman. You're here with my boys, Drew Scott, Kyle Ziegler, and Aiden Weingartner. And tonight we're going to give you a must draft player, a bust, and a value-based player on their ADP for every team in the AFC East because it is preview season here at Fourth and Frames. And we're starting with Aiden's favorite division in the league tonight, baby. So before we get into that, do not forget to like, subscribe, and review to catch anytime a new podcast or short from us at Fantasy and Frames drops. Also, do not forget to search for all of our podcasts here at Fantasy and Frames by name wherever you listen to podcasts. And for us to make sure to subscribe to the Fourth and Frames podcast and lock in at fantasyandframes.com for the latest and greatest in rankings, IDP, Dynasty rankings, articles, takes, news and notes, whatever you need, we got it. Also, some fantasy hockey going on live right now as we talk about it. But fellas, let's go around the frames. My right-hand man for 3 seasons, Drew Scott. How are you, fella?
I'm doing wonderful, man. I'm finally at the point where draft season is going to kick off for me. I've got the second year of being in the Sirius XM Independence Day Invitational. We're drafting on July 4th. Shout out to Howard Bender for the opportunity for that. A lot of sharp people in there. Howard, Coop, Mike Dempsey, Bob Harris, Chris Meany, among others. Fantasy and Frames on Stacey Perez was just added to the league a few days ago. So we got some more Fantasy and Frames representation in the league as well. But we're doing that draft on the 4th of July, and I'll be on Sirius XM for a brief moment discussing the draft on 4th of July as well. So, just turn your knobs over to Sirius XM on Friday evening. And then my Scott Fishbowl draft, I'm doing a slow draft this year. So it kicks off Monday morning. So I got a draft on Friday, draft on Monday, first 2 drafts of the year. So I'm looking forward to this weekend for sure.
Oh, big weekend for you, my man. And Albert is here with us saying hello. Albert, as always, every week, you're one of the OGs. You're one of the real ones that locks in with us every single week. Just like my 2 boys at the bottom right here, Aiden and Kyle, not just starting to become guest hosts, baby. You guys are starting to become institutions here at Fourth and Frames. Aiden, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for the compliment. But I had a ton of fun over the last 3 or 4 weeks or so going over all our I guess we can't say early anymore because it is the summer, but tonight is the real meat and potatoes, if you will, of the summer fantasy prep season, if you want to call it. Going over the divisional previews, talking about players we're higher on, lower on. I can't wait to get this draft prep started. I feel like after the 4th of July, it's just a race to the end of August / early September.
Yeah, it's already July, and that's crazy to think about. And Kyle, tighten up. How are we doing? How are we feeling? Are you ready for draft season? Because I'm going to be honest with how much I've been kind of blowing and going lately. I think I have some catching up to do.
Man, I am feeling great. Definitely looking forward to draft season. I don't know about you guys, but I got friends in leagues that, like, my wife always jokes with me, like, they've been friends for a long time, but I talk to them a little bit more when draft season comes up. Phone's been ringing. The phone's been ringing, and she's like, who is that? And I'm like, it's my buddy Eddie. And she's like, oh, it's that time of year again. Here we go. Yeah, I'm fired up, ready to go.
Yeah, I think we are all fired up, especially as Aiden said, getting into these previews tonight. But before we get into that, let's talk news and notes because we have quite a bit of news going on from the AFC East. A lot of tight end news coming out of the AFC East this week. Starting off with the Miami Dolphins trading Jonnu Smith to the Steelers for a late round pick swap. And we'll get to what that means for the Dolphins pass catcher shortly. But Kyle, first I want to come to you. Does this make Jonnu the clear number 2 passing option in that Steelers offense? And how do you see the targets from Aaron Rodgers shaking out in Pittsburgh?
Well, yeah, we know that Aaron Rodgers loves the tight end. And now he has 2 to choose from because Pat Freiermuth can catch the ball too. So let's not sleep on that. And correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if Rodgers has ever had 2 capable tight ends that can catch the ball like that. This is his first that I can remember. So I was curious. So Aaron Rodgers last year with Green Bay in 2022, I wanted to take a look at how the targets were distributed for that Packer team, because I feel like that team and this Steelers offense are built very similar, minus the DK Metcalf, being the big X receiver that they didn't have. It was Alan Lazard. But anyway, they look similar to me. And Alan Lazard led the way in targets. He had 97. Shocking. He's his best friend, right? But Romeo Doubs came in second with 66, and the young Christian Watson was 65. And then the tight end and Robert Tonyan pulled up in the rear in fourth with 64 targets. Now, where am I going at with this? I feel like the target distribution is going to be the lead dog in DK Metcalf. He's going to have 100, 105, 110 plus targets. And then you have a distant second, third, and fourth, like a Roman Wilson who might step up and be that second. Or maybe it's Pat Freiermuth, or maybe it is Jonnu Smith. I don't know. But to say he's going to be the number 2 Jonnu Smith, I don't know, because I feel like the ball is going to get distributed everywhere. So even if he is number 2 Jonnu Smith in targets, it's going to be a distant number 2. And last thing I wanted to add, Andrew Cooper tweeted out, friend of the show from Fantasy Alarm. He tweeted out that Arthur Smith, who's been a Titans tight end coach, also offensive coordinator, and head coach and offensive coordinator in Pittsburgh, he tweeted out that in those 7 years that he's been a head coach, a tight ends coach, and an offensive coordinator, in all those 7 years, a tight end for him has never played more than 75% of the snaps. That's something to think about.
Yeah, it's a good point. It sucks because it killed 2 different tight ends, because there were 2 tight ends that we were excited about, right? We were excited about Jonnu Smith in Miami, and then we were also excited about Pat Freiermuth and the possibility of him being in Pittsburgh. But none of us more so than the man to my side here, Rhett Manuel, who if you go back and revisit our tight end preview show
literally a week ago,
literally a week ago to the date. Rhett was the highest on Jonnu and the highest on Pat Freiermuth. He had Jonnu the highest among us, and he was the only one among us to have Pat Freiermuth in his top 12, right at tight end 12. So, Rhett, I know that you're the host. You usually do the coordinating, but I got to ask you, being the highest on both of these guys after this trade news breaks, what do we even do with these 2 guys in our rankings now? Like, where do you stand as things stand now?
All right, so first things first, this went without saying before the trade even happened. But quick word to our good friend Arthur Smith, who Kyle just so swimmingly described as a tight end lover, former tight ends coach, head coach, offensive coordinator. Arthur Smith, if you didn't know it by now, let me reiterate the fact that we all hate you.
Yes, we do.
And we'll leave it at that. In terms of what this did to 2 of my if I remember last week, we just called Jonnu Smith my Kyle Pitts, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Truer words have never been spoken at this point. Because with the Arthur Smith 6 tight end dream coming to life at this point,
oh boy,
everything feels dead now. Like, everything is done and dusted and done. You look at this Pittsburgh Steelers offense, and outside of DK Metcalf, which you mentioned, maybe Caleb Johnson, if he emerges, I don't know who we're trusting in this offense. So just a week ago, where I was high on both of these tight ends more than most of us, I'm definitely going to have to go back and reevaluate those rankings and have probably both of them at this point as a tight end too, which hurts for me to do, because it'll be a very significant drop for Jonnu at that point. And for Pat Freiermuth, who's just such a talented player who has never really seemed to have a situation that really works to show his skill set. I mean, it just continues to happen that way. And I mean, at this point, we kind of have to deem him as one of those good at football, not very good for fantasy football sort of tight ends.
Yeah, I agree. There's still some work to be done in terms of a little bit more research before I feel confident where I placed him in my rankings. But right now, I've got Jonnu down at tight end 16, Pat Freiermuth at tight end 24. And then I'll save the Darren Waller ranking for in a minute because we haven't talked about him yet. So I'll save that for now.
And Drew, life comes at you fast sometimes. If you remember 2 years ago, whenever we were first starting this show and first getting to work together, Darren Waller was coming into a new situation as the starting tight end of the New York Giants, where I said at the time that I expected him to have a Travis Kelce-like impact on that offense. And you know what he did not do at that point, Drew?
I don't think he had a Travis Kelce-like impact on that offense.
He in fact did not have a Travis Kelce-like impact on this offense. It got so bad, as a matter of fact, that he took his ball and went home last year before the season started.
Yeah.
Which brings us to where we are today, a couple of days ago, where Darren Waller is coming out of retirement to play with the Miami Dolphins. And the Miami Dolphins traded draft picks for a retired tight end. So, Aiden, you're the one who brought up the retired tight end draft pick situation. Is there any reason for redraft managers to care about this news for this year?
Well, first, I do find it hilarious that the Dolphins even gave up a draft pick for a retired player. That's just a whole thing in of itself. But second, to your direct question, no, I don't. I think this offense is just going to get back to, hopefully they up the vertical passing game element more with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, which I've been above consensus on Jalen Waddle, and I'm coming around, not fully, but just a little bit more to Tyreek Hill. Now that there's not more of that screen dump off guy with Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith had a 4.5, 4.9. I can't remember the exact number, somewhere in that range, ADOT last year. Yeah, on HN can still get those targets, but I don't know if Darren Waller even makes this team. I know I was talking about the offense as a whole, but for Darren Waller himself, this isn't relevant. Coming out of retirement at 33 years old, I don't care if they gave up a pick for you or not. This just seems like a really desperate play from the Dolphins, and I don't understand it at all. I mean, Darren Waller's already disappointed in fantasy, every single year when he was supposedly good, so I don't know how he even does anything now.
Drew, I want to come to you now. I just want to ask you a quick question about Darren Waller. How dope are those rap videos in Miami going to be?
Oh, God.
The scenery for the videos are going to be impeccable. But, that being the follow-up question, I think says enough in terms of how excited you should be about Darren Waller. The fact that we don't even care about his role on this
That's
team.
What we're talking about.
We'd rather talk about the possible backdrops for his next rap video. I've got him as tight end 20, and I don't even know if that's too high. I don't know where consensus is going to come in, but just looking at the names, how things broke out, I ended up putting him in as tight end 20.
So you'd rather have him than Pat Frymuth because you said he's at 24.
Yeah, I would. Just because I do think Jonnu will be the main tight end in that offense as things go along. I do agree with what Kyle said that I think that they'll both be involved, but if I had to pick one that I thought would be the 1A versus the 1B, I think that it will be Jonnu. So I do have Waller a few spots ahead of him, but Cali Raider is dead on here that whenever it's been since 2020. Since you were relevant for fantasy, it's probably not wise to care at this point. So I know there's been some people out on the internet that were advocating to drop the bag on Darren Waller in your dynasty leagues, things like that. If he's out there on waivers, sure, go stash him if you got an open spot. But please, God, don't burn a bunch of fat and shit on Darren Waller in the year 2025. Just don't do that.
Kyle, one last question. Pick your warrior as a third option, Darren Waller or Nick Westbrook Bikini, as Jorge called him last week in the DM to me.
I'm going to go with Nick Westbrook Bikini on this one.
Bikini. You mispronounced it, sir.
Oh.
Get it right and get it tight. Come on now.
They're really from League Washington, but
that too. Yeah. That's a whole different day we could talk about, but I do like
whole
Washington.
Episode.
So, guys, that's news and notes. So let's get into our AFC East must, bust, and values. And when we talk about must, bust, and values, we're talking about players that we think are must draft, bust, or values based on their current Fantasy Pros consensus rankings for half PPR. And we're going to start off with the youngest in charge, the young buck, the long-haired wonder, his favorite team. You see the flags in the background, the Buffalo Bills. And Aiden, I'm going to let you lead it off and tell us who you think is a must draft for the Buffalo Bills. here in 2025?
So initially, right off the bat, this name I'm going to bring up here in a second might surprise you because the public perception out there is, well, the Bills' passing attack is great for real life. For fantasy, it's too spread out. Who can we really trust?
Facts.
Who will get those spike weeks? But this guy's a slot target, and we know Josh Allen funnels the ball to slot targets. And I think this guy is the only guy that we can say has the best chance to get double-digit targets on a week in and week out basis. And that is slot wide receiver Khalil Shakir, who currently possesses an ECR wide receiver 39. So while this passing attack is spread out, I do believe that Khalil Shakir is the one that we can say confidently will get the targets in a week out and week out basis. The touchdown ceiling is probably honestly capped because he's not the biggest red zone guy and red zone target in the world. After Khalil Shakir, it is spread out. But if there was one guy I would put my finger on, put my pulse on, if you will, then I would go with Khalil Shakir getting those week in and week out targets. And we've seen him be the most consistent in this passing attack, no matter what the weapons have been around him over the last couple of years.
So, Aiden, if he's going at wide receiver 39, I need to know what you think his ceiling might be. So, Khalil Shakir has a breakout season. He's unreal. He absolutely kills it this year. He ends the season as wide receiver blank, and tell me why.
So, absolute ceiling, you're asking me?
Yeah.
You want me to put a number on it? Okay. I'd say because it is still a run-heavy offense, and Josh Allen gets a lot of those red zone carries. So I will go, obviously, much higher than the wide receiver 39 he's at right now. I'll go like wide receiver, just might be bold, but like 26, 28 range, somewhere in there.
Yeah,
I think that's reasonable considering, because then you're looking at what would be a high-end wide receiver 3, and he's currently going as a high-end wide receiver 4. So I don't think you're far off in that sort of assessment at all.
Thank you.
So looking at the must player, Aiden goes a little bit under the radar and goes with Khalil Shakir. Drew, I love where you're heading. I want to see where your head is because it seems like every year you find one of these guys and you hit on at least one of them where we just kind of come out the gate and we're like, yeah, Drew knows ball. So go ahead and tell us your bust and why you think James Cook, currently clocking in as the ECR running back 14, is a bust here in 2025.
Yeah, I don't know if this will be one of those Drew knows ball moments, but if you throw enough darts at the dartboard, you're going to hit eventually. But it's partially having concerns about James Cook, but it's also just being higher than consensus on a few guys as well, which naturally is going to push Cook down. But I talked about this back during our early running back rankings episode whenever we were looking at running backs 13 through 24. So if you haven't checked that out, go back and check that out as well. But there's an account on Twitter that I follow. I just found this offseason that's great. It's at FF Datarama that they summarize my concerns about as good as you can. So I'm just going to quote his tweet to save some time. But essentially last year, James Cook had a 48% snap share, which was 37th best among running backs. And he had a 35.2% route share, which was 36th best. So the usage, not anything crazy. Despite that, he had a 7.7% touchdown rate, which was a full percentage point higher than the next closest running back, and was insanely high compared to the previous year where he only had 2 rushing touchdowns on 237 attempts. So it's not like the touchdowns just went up a little bit. Like they went up astronomically last year. And despite the fact he had such a high touchdown rate, he was still just 25th among running backs when it came to attempts inside the 5-yard line. So not only was he was scoring a lot of long touchdowns. Touchdowns themselves are really hard to replicate year to year. And then whenever you start talking about long touchdowns, it gets even more difficult. But the thing is, like the reason why I understand to an extent where his ranking is Cook is still at a really good offense, and nothing has really changed since last year. I think the usage could be similar to last year. It feels like, but you're going to need close to similar touchdown luck. And that just feels like a really bad bet to me, especially when you consider that his receiving work even went down last year compared to the year prior as well. It's tough to pick someone as an outright bust for the Bills because I don't really hate any of their values and drafts right now, but I am lower on Cook than his ECR running back 14 ranking. I've got guys like Kenneth Walker and Alvin Kamara ahead of consensus and ahead of James Cook. So that pushes him down. And so he's running back 14 in ECR. I've got him at running back 16. So whenever we're looking at the Bills, he's the guy that stands out as a potential bust to me.
Kyle, where are you at on James Cook right now? How do you see the situation with him? Drew's a little bit lower on him than consensus. Are you a little bit higher? Are you about the same? What are your thoughts on James Cook heading into 2025?
I'm right there with Drew, actually. I wrote a Dynasty Faller article. I know it's for Dynasty, but I wrote one on James Cook, and Drew laid it out beautifully. He's a little bit high for me. There's a lot of guys, excuse me. There's a lot of guys in that range, an ADP, that I would prefer. I don't have it pulled up right here, but there's several. I mean, even Kenneth Walker I'd rather have. I know he's lower. There's just so many guys I'd rather have than James Cook when you're talking ADP for running back.
Yeah. Aiden, any thoughts on James Cook? I know this is your guy. I know this is your team, but Drew's laying out a good argument. I mean, long touchdowns plus what's already an unpredictable category. I mean, it feels like a slam dunk to call him a bust, but where do you stand on him?
So funny enough, I'm exactly ECR. I got him spot on in my rankings right at RB14. I do understand both sides, though. For the positive, yes, he doesn't get like a ton of snap share usage and a ton of carries and volume, but with the volume he does get, he's extremely efficient with that volume. He's extremely explosive with that volume. But on the negative side, if here's his rushing touchdowns the first 3 years in the league: 2, 16. So if you go from 4 combined rushing touchdowns in your first 2 to 16, that's not going to repeat again. Can he still get to 8 to 10 touchdowns? Sure. But if he's not getting those, held up by touchdowns, where's he really going to be at? And one last nugget here I find interesting. For a guy that's really, perceived this elite receiving back, Josh Allen isn't really a check down guy, especially of late. So James Cook is considered that, but he hasn't really been that. If you just look at the route share and the raw receptions, I don't think he's had more than I think his season high for a season was 36 receptions. And that's nothing elite, at least how people perceive him. So I understand both sides.
Man, Drew, you know what I love right now?
What's that?
You remember when Aiden first started with us, he was just a straight facts guy, and now he's talking about things like reception share.
Well, I'm in tune with the Bills, obviously. So.
It's beautiful, baby. I love it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing.
And Callie Raider giving us a great compliment. He says, even though he's an AFC West guy, he likes the vibes we got going, which I appreciate that. That's so much love. And he says he has a Patriot question, if he may. Dude, go ahead and shoot your question out whenever we talk about the Patriots in a little while. We will gladly get to your question, my guy.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And then lastly, we want to talk values. And Kyle, for me being a tight end guy, I have a lot of bad tight end takes. And I wrote something last year for Last Word on Sports where for some reason I was really high on this tight end and I just didn't take into account the fact that Josh Allen was kind of just going to spread the ball around. I kind of saw the no real receiver, so he has to be the guy situation. And it didn't really work out. So tell me why this is the year for Dalton Kincaid and why he's a value at tight end 12.
Yeah, I've said it before quickly on this show that there's no reason why he can't step the hell up and demand the target share in this offense. I have no data to even bring to the table on this one. But here's what I can say. He's contending with freaking Khalil Shakir, who is their number 1 receiver, right? Aiden just said, best he's going to finish as wide receiver 26. So Shakir, Keon Coleman, and Josh Palmer for targets. Why the hell can you just drink some Prime, get out there, and be the target leader for this team? There's really no reason for it. Now here, he is entering his 3rd year. So typically that's where we do see breakouts for tight end. So maybe this is the year. But like I said, I have no data on it because he has not done anything. 44 catches. It just doesn't make sense to me. But at his current ADP at tight end 12, I do like it. After everything that I just said, I'm willing to take a chance on him because if he can lead this team in targets, which I think he should, then there's no reason why he shouldn't be able to finish top 5, top 6 at the tight end position. And if you can do that, then that is a great value at that ADP.
Kyle, asking you shall receive on the data when it comes to why Dalton.
Oh, I know it's not good.
No, there are some underlying metrics there that just kind of let you know that, hey, something can happen here. He had a 20.2% target share at the position, which was 8th among tight ends. When he was on the field, which was only for 57% of the time, he had a 29.4% target rate, which was 7th among tight ends. His ADOT was 8th at the position at 7.6. He had 11 deep targets, which was 2nd at the position. He was number 2 in unrealized air yards at 399. And his expected fantasy points were 11.5, which was 3.74 points better than what he actually ended up doing, which was at 7.8 fantasy points per game. So when you look at Dalton Kincaid and you look at the efficiency metrics, you say, why the hell isn't it happening? And that's exactly what you're getting at. There's no good reason why it isn't happening in this offense. It's just one of these things where I think just the way things are built, we kind of just spread the ball around and everybody gets to eat a little bit and nobody really gets to stand out outside of Josh Allen and outside of apparently James Cook getting 16 rushing touchdowns.
He was also among tight ends with at least 50 targets last year. He was third in yards after the catch per reception, and he was 12th in yards per route run as well. So, I mean, there is some underlying metrics that could possibly say better things are coming, but it's just so weird, man. That passing offense in general is a tough one to figure out, but you could do worse than throwing a dart on Kincaid where he's going in drafts right now.
Dude, I completely agree with that. So we're going over the Buffalo Bills. Before we get into the new home of Darren Waller, the Miami Dolphins, our must draft with Aiden is Khalil Shakir at ECR wide receiver 39. Our bust is running back James Cook with the ECR running back 14. And our value is Dalton Kincaid at ECR tight end 12. Boys, let's go to South Beach.
Before we do that, just real quick, Callie, I'll just say we're going to talk about the Patriots last in terms of a must draft, a bust draft, and a value pick. Drake May is one of those three. So just, stay tuned and we'll let you know where that is. But, just hang out with us for a little bit.
Stay locked in with us. So, boys, let's go to South Beach. It is where LeBron James made the decision. It is where Dan Marino plied his trade. It is where the Jersey Shore cast had multiple seasons of hijinks and gym tan and laundry. Ladies and gentlemen, the Miami Dolphins, if nothing else, since Mike McDaniel has taken over, have managed to make things interesting on offense. And that's great for fantasy football. So we're going to start off with probably the most exciting player in this offense, the guy who has had the longest track record of fantasy success. So, Kyle, Tyreek Hill is clocking it as the ECR wide receiver 15. That currently feels like a reach for me where I'm sitting, but you're telling me that at wide receiver 15, he is a must draft. You've been high on him all season, and I want to hear the take one last time. Tell our people why in redraft, in half PPR formats, you're all in on Tyreek Hill.
Well, the Jonnu Smith move definitely enhances my argument here, but I just have a sneaky feeling that the Dolphins are cleaning house, perhaps a soft reset, so to speak, potential rebuild, and Hill may not even be on this team come trade deadline. And that's okay with me, because if a team is going to trade for Tyreek Hill at any point, most likely I believe it's going to be a playoff contending team that will take Tyreek Hill on for one last year. And the chances of that happening, the quarterback is going to be better than Tua Tagovailoa, so I'm okay with whatever happens. But even if he stays in Miami, I'm okay with him at wide receiver 15. He's a must-have for me, because if they are in some type of rebuild, Achane at running back 6 is just way too rich for me if the team is imploding. They're going to have negative game script, and it just takes the run game out. And Jonnu Smith had 111 targets last year, and those are gone. And now they have to distribute that between the rest of them. And Tyreek Hill is one that is going to get a majority of those targets. And he already had quite a bit of targets last year. I think it was like 89 targets or something like that. But he's going to improve on that. I expect Tyreek Hill to have a bounce back, who finished wide receiver 18 last year. So you're getting him wide receiver 15, to me, that's the opposite of what you just said. I think, Rhett, it's actually amazing value to get him as a wide receiver 2, which you've never been able to do ever with Tyreek Hill.
All right, you might be swaying me right now because it's just one of those things where, yeah, we were used to a very certain level of Tyreek Hill production. And so whenever he has a pretty okay wide receiver 2 season, it feels like the response was Chicken Little for all of us. Like, the sky is falling, he's done, he's cooked, all these different things. But no, you very well may be right in the fact that maybe it was an overreaction. Maybe he gets traded to a contender. Maybe he sticks around and he becomes the Tyreek Hill that he was in previous years. But at wide receiver 15 right now, you're right. You've never been able to get him cheaper. And especially in a redraft format where you guys like to pick on me for my ageism all the time. But if you can get Tyreek Hill at wide receiver 15, and we know that pretty much every year in his career, most years, he's had wide receiver 1 upside. I think I might be coming around to where you are with that argument.
And we're only 2 years removed from an 1,800-yard season that he had, 1,799 to be exact, with this Dolphins offense.
Yeah. So, Aiden, you in lockstep with that, or how you feel about it before we talk about your bust?
Yeah, the Tyreek Hill take. I'm moving him. So right now, tentatively, before I update my rankings, I have him at wide receiver 24. I'm absolutely going to move him up a few spots or so with the Jonnu Smith trade. I am coming on him a bit more. I'd still rather have Jalen Waddle at value, but I totally see what Kyle's saying, that you've never been able to get him at this price before, like not once ever. So I'm coming on it. I'm coming around on him a lot, I'd say.
Thank you for adding in that around right there just now, Aiden, because you almost slipped up twice. It said something very inappropriate about poor Tyreek Hill, and we don't want that, my man.
Right.
So, Aiden, after this very awkward transition of Tyreek Hill.
You made it weird.
I did make it weird. And that's what I'm here for. I told you I was in silly goose mode tonight. Your bust. Kyle kind of mentioned him. He kind of mentioned a negative game script. But I may have a little bit of a rebuttal that if the Dolphins are in a negative game script, while he may not be worthy of being running back 6, Devon Achane might hold some value. But why do you think he is a bust here in 2025?
Yeah. Talking about the negative game script, that secondary outside of Minkah Fitzpatrick, who they just acquired, is like pretty awful. So they're going to have to pass a ton. Tua's going to have 40 to 45 passing attempts a game. And most importantly, people aren't thinking about this. If Mike McDaniel is fighting for his job this year, which honestly I think he will be, then he's going to want to return the verticality element to this offense. And that benefits Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, not a guy in Devon Achane who gets a lot of screens and design touches and dump offs from Tua. And trading away Jonnu, they obviously want to emphasize the verticality again. In number 2, if he is RB6, I would take Bucky. I would take guys like Bucky Irving over him. I would take guys like Josh Jacobs over him. In number 3, I know I'm saying a lot of points here, but let's just say it like it is. Devon Achane does have a smaller frame for an NFL running back. He just got 203 carries last year. I kind of worry, can he hold up? Can he handle that high amount of volume again with his smaller frame? So that's just why I'm really worried about Devon Achane. It's not because I don't like the talent. It's not because he's not explosive. Just right now where he's ranked, it makes me uncomfortable.
Drew,
I got to be honest. Sorry, go ahead, Rhett.
I was going to come to you right now, but go ahead and say what you're going to say, then I'm going to play a game with you.
I got to be honest. I really thought that these 2 guys were going to be flipped, and Achane was going to be the must draft, and Tyreek was going to be the bust. I was kind of surprised whenever we got into the show sheet. I'm not going to lie. I've got Tyreek 4 spots lower than his ranking in the ECR. I'm more in line with consensus with Achane, especially with Jonnu gone now. And I hear what you guys are saying, but number 1, I think a negative game script is a good thing for Achane. It's not just the targets that he's going to get, but it's how good he is with them. Among running backs with at least 20 targets last year, he was 2nd in target share, 9th in yards per route run, and he was 2nd in receiving yards per game. And with Jonnu out of the picture, those short targets, those low ADOT targets are just going. I feel like they're just going to increase for Achane, and it sounds good wanting to get back to the verticality of the passing game like that. Whenever you've got Tyreek Hill in your offense, obviously that's a goal. But that's a lot easier said than done whenever your offensive line is absolute dog shit and your quarterback is one concussion away from going to a retirement home. You can want to throw deep all day long, but if your offensive line doesn't allow the offense to actually develop, then that becomes a lot more difficult. Now, there are a lot of ways to get Tyreek the ball other than just deep targets. And I will say with Tyreek, he's probably the one I'm most nervous about that I'm lower than consensus on. It's not very often that you see wide receivers 30 plus years old regress the way that he did last year, and then those numbers bounce back. But if the speed is still there, there's always that possibility for him. He's the one that I've been fighting myself to try to not I want to move him up, and I keep trying to make up excuses to move him up, but I struggle to find a reason to move up over the guys that I have ahead of him. But I understand the Tyreek one a little bit more, but Devon Achane, I was already at running back 6, I think. And then I ended up moving him up once the news happened. I just think that with the involvement he's going to have in the running game, plus the threat that he is in the passing game, I think that Achane at this point is game script proof. And the only thing that worries me with Achane is whenever you look at the splits of how productive he is with Tua on the field versus if Tua misses games, he's almost a non-factor whenever Tua is not out there. But whenever Tua is out there, he's been the running back 1 overall in points per game in the games that Tua has played in. So I'm going to have a lot of trouble passing on Achane in the second round of drafts this year. I'll say that. If he makes it to me in the second round of drafts, I'm probably just going to be auto-clicking him every single time. Whereas Tyreek, I can make some, I can at least make some arguments in my head to why he might not be worth it. But I could see myself regretting that.
Just a quick question for you, Drew.
Yep.
Does the Ollie Gordon draft make you worried at all? I know he's a 6th round pick, but here's what I'm getting at. They have been track stars at the running back position. They've just nothing but fast guys. That's their motto. And then they draft Ollie Gordon, who's a much bigger back. So when they get down to the red zone and the goal line, do you see Ollie Gordon at all being used down there?
I could see that, yeah. I don't forecast whenever Achane does score. I don't forecast a lot of his touchdowns coming from the 1-2 yard line, things like that, right? So I do think that that's a fair thing to say that Ollie Gordon or Jalen Wright or anybody else in that backfield, they could possibly give somebody
Alexander Madison
and those touches. Yeah, shit. I mean, it sounds funny to say it, but no joke, it could very well end up being Alexander Madison in that role. Who knows? But that's not where HM makes his money, so that doesn't concern me too much. But I do think that that's a spot where you can concede some touches for sure.
All right, real quick, guys, before we move into Drew's value pick, any religious guys in the house? Any Catholics in the building? No Catholics.
No Catholics.
All right, no Catholics. Anyway, at the end of Catholic Church, there's a little thing called a responsorial psalm. So when I give you a stat, the responsorial psalm is going to be Devon Achane. Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
Let's go.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Who was number 2 among running backs last year in targets?
Devon Achane.
Devon Achane.
Who was number 1 in receiving yards?
Devon
Achane.
Who was number 1 in receptions?
Devon Achane.
Who was number 9 in fantasy points per opportunity?
Devon Achane.
Do you see where I'm going with this?
It's all Devon Achane.
Top 10 across the board.
Yes. So the game script thing, and I'm with Drew, and I think we have a hung jury on Devon Achane because I'm right there on the wide receiver 6. I might even have him a little bit higher than that because I just really love the fact that last year you watched their offense. He played a lot of slot for that team. And I don't care that Nick Westbrook Bikini is in the building. I don't. Because the true slot wide receiver in that offense is Devon Achane.
And we have another correction in the chat. Shout out to our boy Chris B, bringing back another old school meme that we used to have. It is Alexander Madison, not Alexander Madison. Alexander Madison, which is accurate. So, yeah, just wanted to throw that out there. Devon intervention. He never misses with the wordplay, man. Chris just never misses.
Oh my God! And speaking of not missing, Drew, your value guy. We love the Dolphins receiver room mainly for these 2 guys. One of them is coming in at what is perceived as a value because he's never been this low before, And quite frankly, the guy you're about to talk about might not have ever come in this low either since he's been in the league. So feels like it's a steal getting Jalen Waddle a wide receiver 30. So tell us why that is.
Yeah, and he was at wide receiver 30 in the expert consensus rankings on Monday prior to the trade. I checked earlier. Since then, he's went up to wide receiver 28. He might even climb some more, but it's still going to have to climb a lot more for me to not consider Waddle a value. This offense feels pretty easy to project with Jonnu out of the picture, regardless of Darren Waller coming out of retirement or not. But last year, there were 111 plays that Tyreek and Waddle were on the field without Jonnu, and the target share in those 111 plays were 30% for Tyreek, 25% for Waddle, 22% for Achane. It was pretty clear cut. These are the guys. These are who's getting the ball more often than not. I've got Waddle up at wide receiver 23. And honestly, if Waddle and Tua are both available to stay healthy for the majority of the year, which I know it's been a big ask, but that wide receiver 23 might still be too low. I was going to use the Fantasy Points data suite to drive this point home, but friend of the show, D-Bro over at Fantasy Pros, he did a perfect job. Put this out on Twitter, so I'm just going to quote that for you instead. Last year in games where Tua played and Waddle played at least 70% of the snaps, because that is something else to keep in mind with Waddle. If you just look at games played, it's not going to look like he's missed that many games for somebody that we consider quote-unquote injury prone, but he gets banged up a lot in games and misses snaps, comes out early, things like that. So in games where he played at least 70% of the snaps and Tua played in the games, he was at 2.14 yards per route run, 64.6 receiving yards per game, and 0.114 first downs per route run. Just to give some context, among receivers last year, all of those numbers would have been top 30, and the first down per route run would have been inside the top 15. So Jalen Waddle, the player, I think he still has it. And last year was obviously a struggle, and it's likely why we're getting such a solid discount this year. But this is a guy who was the wide receiver 22 in points per game in 2021, wide receiver 13 in 2022, wide receiver 22 in 2023. So that's 3 straight years of being wide receiver 22 or better in points per game. He has one less guy to compete with for targets after the Jonnu deal now, and we're getting him at wide receiver 30 or wide receiver 28 if you want to go with the most update expert consensus ranking. So as long as both him and Tua stay healthy for the majority of the year, I think he easily outperforms that and ends up being a great value in drafts.
I got a question for you.
Yep.
I was thinking about this while you were talking because I'm very bullish on Waddle as well myself. If he stays perfectly healthy, if the whole ecosystem like Tua stays perfectly healthy, could Waddle be a sneaky wide receiver 1 top 12 finisher?
Yeah, I definitely think so, especially if Jonnu leaving leads to Waddle possibly getting more slot targets, kind of like what he did in his rookie year whenever he had a lower ADOT and was getting more targets in his rookie season. I definitely think that could give him more floor, where Waddle has been mostly a ceiling guy, it feels like the last year or so. I think if that were to change a little bit, I think he could have a little bit of floor to go with the ceiling. I think he could be a possible a top 12 receiver. I think that's in his range of outcomes for sure.
I agree.
So, Kyle, before we get into the New York Jets, knowing what we know now and knowing Jonnu Smith is gone, who do you think is the better value between Tyreek Hill with less way to climb up before he gets to wide receiver 1 territory, or Jalen Waddle?
It's definitely Jalen Waddle when you talk value like that. Yeah. Because even like in best balls, I've noticed that Jalen, ever since the Jonnu Smith trade, I could still get him at like overall 90 on best ball. And I absolutely smashed that pick with Jalen Waddle. So yeah. So Jalen Waddle's the answer to that question, Red. I'm not a fool.
I didn't say you were a fool, but I just wanted to see because you're very high on Tyreek Hill. So I just wanted to see if there was.
He'll take both. If he can draft them both, which, by the way, you can do it this year. I mean, not that you're advising drafting 2 receivers off the same team, but if there is a year where you just felt really good about the Dolphins offense and you felt good about Drew's stats of 30, 25, and 22 and Jonnu wasn't on the field, this is a year where you can possibly get both of those guys and kind of play your spike weeks and, double dip on it.
I feel like if you do that, at least one of those receivers will go off. We'll have a spike week, at least one out of those 2.
You're guaranteed a 50-50 shot. So.
The Dolphins are what we want for fantasy. They're an explosive offense that also has a shit defense. So They have the ability to put up points, and then their defense is going to require them to need to put up points on a weekly basis.
Them and the Bengals.
I've been stacking the shit out of them in best ball.
It's what we got from the Bengals last year. It's exactly right. Just, I mean, the court, like comparing Tua to Burrow is not apples to apples, but it's a potentially explosive offense with a bad defense, which is just music to my ears whenever it comes to fantasy football. So I like, even though I'm lower than consistent with Tyreek Hill, I like taking shots on all these guys in drafts, including Tyreek.
Yeah. And so reviewing the Miami Dolphins, Kyle had his must draft at Tyreek Hill at ECR wide receiver 15. Aiden had his bust as Devon A-Chain as the ECR running back 6. And Drew's value was Jalen Waddle as the ECR wide receiver 28. So let's move up the coast. Let's go to New York, guys, because there is a lot of change that happened over there this offseason. The Aaron Rodgers experiment didn't quite work out. There's a coaching change. There's a new quarterback. There are a lot of things that look different in New York. So this is probably seen as a rebuilding year, but we're just going to go ahead and just start with a guy who I think we've all fallen in love with in terms of the value he's supplying at the quarterback position. Drew, tell us why Justin Fields at ECR 14. I think we all feel like there is some quarterback one upside, and maybe even some mid-level quarterback one upside on Justin Fields.
Yeah, and I mean, for good reason. The reality is Justin Fields as a starting quarterback in the NFL, he's a great option for fantasy football. It might not always be pretty. NFL teams might not like what they get on the field, but it's very productive for fantasy, and that's all I care about. He was the quarterback 5 in points per game in 2022. He was the quarterback 8 in 2023, and the quarterback 7 in 2024 in points per game the weeks that he was a starter. So we're talking about 3 straight years of being a top 8 quarterback, and yet somehow he's ranked as the quarterback 14 in ECR. And I think outside of injury, he's a really good bet to play the entire year, even if he's not playing well. The Jets gave Fields $30 million guaranteed whenever they signed him to his 2-year contract, and they got Tyrod Taylor as the backup quarterback. I mean, no disrespect, because I love Tyrod, but if Fields isn't playing well, I don't think a team looks at Tyrod sitting there as the backup and thinks, all right, we're going to turn to this guy and he's going to turn our season around. He's going to save our season. He's going to take us on a playoff run the way that the Steelers looked at Russell Wilson last year whenever Fields started out the season as a starter. Now, if you want to have the debate on should the Steelers have ever viewed Russell Wilson in that light and should they have turned from Fields, that's a whole nother debate. But I don't think that Fields has that kind of issue this year with Tyrod like he had with Russell Wilson, given the contract that he has and where Tyrod is in his career. If you feel differently, then I think I could understand why you think he might be more of a risky pick with him. Like if you think that at the first sign of struggle, the Jets are going to turn the offense over to Tyrod Taylor, then you shouldn't draft him as QB 14. But I think that outside of injury, you're going to get a guy that's been nothing but a QB1 for fantasy football as long as he's been the starter, and I think he's going to be the starter for the entire of the year. And you're getting that at QB2 prices. I've got Fields up at QB10. He's a must draft for me, and he's my favorite late round quarterback target in 1 quarterback leagues this year.
And Moggs comes out and says it's his legs that will produce, and that's what I was going to get at, because Moggs, you are absolutely right. If you look at those 6 starts that Justin Fields had last year with the Pittsburgh Steelers, he had 55 rushing yards or more 3 times, and he had a rushing touchdown in 3 of those 6 weeks as well. So whenever you say his legs are the things that are going to produce, you're absolutely right, and no one's arguing that fact at all, because when you have a person who has that much physical upside in the run game, I mean, we've seen Josh Allen carry that to quarterback 1 seasons. We've seen Lamar Jackson carry rushing upside to quarterback 1 seasons. It's a cheat code. It very simply is a quicker way to run up fantasy points. If you get a fantasy point for every 25 for 25 passing yards, you get a fantasy point for every 10 rushing yards. So where it takes Justin Fields 125 passing yards to get 5 fantasy points, it takes him 50 rushing yards.
And then
Either
on top
way,
of that, most leagues, if it's a 4-point per passing touchdown league, you're only getting 4 points per passing touchdown, but yet the rushing quarterbacks are getting 6 points per rushing touchdown.
Exactly.
So just additional points on top of that as well. So yeah, you and Moggs both are dead on, and it's the reason why I love Justin Fields so much. I do think he's still a tad underrated as a passer. Like I don't think he was playing that bad last year when he got benched. Again, a whole nother argument for a whole nother day. But he's not a great passer. Like I mean, there's a reason why he's had to move around as much as he has. But for fantasy football purposes, that doesn't matter to us. The fantasy points are fantasy points, regardless if they come from the arms or the legs. And it feels like an Aldi's version of what we got with Jaden Daniels in drafts last year, with how cheap he was, and then he ended up being a top 5 quarterback. Now, Justin Fields is not the passer that Jaden Daniels is, so I don't expect him to hit that top 5 ceiling, but I could see him absolutely coming in as quarterback 7, quarterback 8, and whenever he's being drafted as a quarterback 14, that's a pretty easy click for me.
Aldi Jaden Daniels is an awesome nickname, by the way. Can we run with that?
Sure.
Put the graphic out.
Make it happen. So our must draft Justin Fields at quarterback 14. Kyle, are you familiar with the classic marriage book, The 5 Love Languages?
Yeah, actually I am.
You might be speaking all 5 of my love languages right now with your bus pick, so just run through it.
Okay. All right. Breece Hall, running back. What was it? The ECR
13.
13. Yeah. Running back 13 ECR. Career low last year, 4.2 yards per carry. He was stuffed on 49% of his rushing attempts, which was the 10th worst in the league among backs with at least 125 carries. He ranked 28th in missed tackles forced per touch with among backs who played in at least 8 games. Guys with less volume did more. Tank Bigsby, Zach Charbonnet, and Ray Davis from Aiden's Buffalo Bills had more missed tackles forced there. You know, Breece Hall actually doesn't protect the football very well. He had the second highest fumbles behind Ramondre Stevenson. And finally, he only had 209 carries. He was running back 23 in run snaps. I expect that number to actually come down even further because, as you laid out beautifully, Justin Fields is under center now, not Aaron Rodgers. What does Justin Fields like to do? Get outside the numbers and take off when he can. And one last thing, Braylon Allen, he's a bigger back, 6'1", 236 pound. There's some rumblings that they're going to get him more involved, and I believe they actually will. He's built for it, especially around the red zone and goal line especially. I think he's going to vulture some touches down there because Breece Hall didn't particularly play well from the red zone and the goal line. He only had 8 carries from in the red zone from the 5-yard line, I should say. So I think they're going to get Braylon Allen on the ball a little bit more when they get down into the goal line.
Can I just go ahead and can I just say this?
You told me to let it rip, so I just let it rip.
Can I just say that in a very matter-of-fact way and add something to what you just said?
Sure.
Yeah, Breece Hall sucks.
Oh boy.
So
He does not.
Are we done with the disrespect yet?
no,
Come back down to earth now.
He's still a good pure rusher.
time out, dude. Are we sure about that? So let me give you a number last year. So
well, he's an elite receiver, though. We'll give him that.
Expected points added. Y'all gonna let me cook right now. Y'all not gonna shut me down.
Let him go. Let him go.
All
right. EPA. Breece Hall among running backs was 144th in EPA last year with negative 44.
Okay.
That is damning if I've ever heard anything ever. To further talk about this, Player Profiler has a stat that talks about average defenders in the box when a running back is carrying the ball. Breece Hall faced an average of 6.1 defenders in the box per carry. That was 62nd among the position. We can go further. Yeah, he's a fantastic receiver. But my favorite stat, explosive Breece Hall, as we like to talk about, I'm pretty sure when I looked at it, he didn't have a run past 20 yards outside of week 6 last season. So the narrative is Breece Hall is explosive. Breece Hall is a great receiver. Breece Hall is a volume-based player. There's a very real place, and you just kind of laid it out this year, where Braylon Allen takes some of those touches, Justin Fields takes some of those catches, and Breece Hall at running back 13 is an absolute fucking mirage.
Wow.
Okay.
All right, so I would understand. I would understand the Breece Hall fade if he was approaching the age cliff and he was coming off of a down year. Like we're talking about like his age 30 season and he had a down year, or if there had been clear signs of regression leading up to this, like it wasn't just like a fall off a cliff thing. But we're talking about a guy that was a great, not good, not okay. He was a great prospect coming out of college. His rookie year, the snaps that he did play, he looked great. His second year, he looked great. So we're talking about his entire college career, his first 2 years of the NFL. He was a great player. And then all of a sudden last year, things fell off a cliff. And the entire offense, not just Breece Hall, the entire offense struggled as a whole, okay? And we're talking about, like all of us on this panel have talked about how we know that Breece Hall is a legit passing threat, right? We know that the guy can catch passes, right? You would think that everybody knows that. You know who didn't know that and who admitted it on the fucking stage? His offensive coordinator, Nathaniel Hackett, at the end of the 2023 season said he was not ready for Breece Hall to be a productive player in the passing game. Breece Hall, guys, he did not know that Breece Hall could be a productive pass-catching running back. This is the guy that in 2024 we were depending on to properly use his offensive weapons and produce a productive offense, okay? That's a peek behind the curtain of the guy that they gave the keys to of the offense and said, we want you to run our offense, all right? The guy didn't even know that Breece Hall could catch passes. Like, what are we talking about? The Jets hopefully made considerable upgrades to the coaching staff this offseason. They made big improvements to the offensive line. You guys talked about how often he was stuffed and things like that. There were 48 running backs with at least 85 rushing attempts last year. Among those 48 running backs, Breece Hall was 32nd in yards before contact per attempt. He averaged barely over 1.5 yards before contact, per attempt before contact. Like, how many tackles you want the guy to break before he can even get to 3 yards? Like, I mean, it's insane to me. And I think the concerns with the passing game usage now that Justin Fields is the quarterback is a bit over-exaggerated as well. Fields has been inside the top 11 quarterbacks in check down percentage each of the last 2 years and 3 of the last 4 years. He's been in the top 11 quarterbacks. And so if you're concerned about the overall volume of passes to go around, I think that's fair because the passing volume should not be that high with Fields at quarterback. But outside of Garrett Wilson, who's really going to demand a bunch of targets? Like, even if there's not a lot of targets to go around outside of Garrett Wilson, who's really going to out-target Breece Hall anyway? And Justin Fields has shown us, despite being a running quarterback, that he's not afraid to check down the ball whenever he's a starter either. So any coach that's watched Breece Hall outside of Nathaniel Hackett knows that he's a good weapon and can be used in the passing game. And I'd be willing to bet that the new Jets offensive coordinator, who was the former Lions passing game coordinator, has seen some pretty good examples of how you draw up targets for the running back, considering what they did for Jahmyr Gibbs out there in Detroit. So I think that they probably have an idea of how to use a pass catching running back, apparently unlike Nathaniel Hackett. Because that dude could not fucking hack it. And I still believe in Breece Hall, the talent. Braylon Allen, and even to an extent maybe Isaiah Davis, they might see some snaps. But I think Breece is still the clear best running back on this roster and will demand the majority of the touches. I just think we're forgetting there's a lot of sting that comes with playing fantasy football. Whenever you're in on a guy like Breece Hall that's going in the first round and then he burns the hell out of you. And it's not like he got hurt the first week of the season and he was out for the rest of the year. You had to set him in your lineup most weeks and watch him underperform week after week after week. Instead of just like, well, he's injured, I put him in my IR slot. It hurts, but he's not causing me the pain of watching him underperform. And I think that stuff starts to linger and we lose sight of the bigger picture. And so if you're gonna ask me if it's more likely that a former elite running back that fell off in the middle of his age 23 season, or if that was just an outlier in what's been an otherwise really productive career, both in college and the NFL, I'm going to go with that being an outlier. So I don't think that the running back 13 ECR is high enough.
What?
I've got him at running back 11.
Oh boy.
Oh, 2 more.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh my
yeah.
God.
Yeah, he's an RB1 this year. Yeah, he's back as an RB1 this year.
I got him RB21, so I've come down quite a bit. But
My God, Drew.
Yeah. Yeah.
For a second there, I was like, you've made the best pro Breece Hall argument I've heard. Then you told me he was a running back.
You think I was gonna say all that to say I wasn't above consensus? You think I wasted all that breath to say running back 13's fine?
Rhett has lost faith.
I'm appalled right now. Like I'm just we're on very opposite ends of the spectrum right now.
You're
And
off the
that's
show.
fine. And I respect your opinion and I love you no matter what. But damn. We're there, baby. Redraft season has arrived, and let's go ahead and let's talk about Aiden's value at the tight end position. But before you do it, you have to give us your best Ed Ogeron Go Tigers.
You really want to hear that?
I really do.
Okay. Go Tigers. I don't know.
It actually wasn't bad.
That wasn't bad.
I want to give you another chance here.
So, Aiden, tell us why Mason Taylor as the ECR tight end 27 is a value.
Yeah, this is a really deep poll because one, like you just said, Rat, is ECR tight end 27, and two, he's just a rookie. I'm excluding Breece Hall here because I'm talking about pure passing game weapons in terms of wide receivers and tight ends. Obviously, Fields has that elite connection. Garrett Wilson, Ohio State days, he's going to have 140, 150 plus targets, somewhere around there. But someone's going to have to catch the ball here as the number 2 option. And no, I don't want to hear about Alan Lazard. I don't want to hear about Malachi Corley. He's not even smart enough to, keep the ball in his hands instead of dropping it by the goal line.
Since when is that a brain issue? Just curious.
What?
Since when is that a brain issue, by the way? Just honest question.
Top for another day. But anyway, if I'm betting on someone to be the number 2 option in this passing game behind Garrett Wilson, I like it to be a talented, young, athletic rookie at the tight end position in Mason Taylor. And I'm not advising you to take Mason Taylor as your one and only tight end. I'm not saying wait till round whatever, the last round or 2 of your draft and take Mason Taylor, because that's just kind of a weird strategy in my opinion. But if you get a guy like Sam Laporta early to middle of your draft, and then pair him with a guy like Mason Taylor just in case Laporta doesn't bounce back. Jameis Williams is really the number 2 there instead of him. Then I like that pair. But Mason Taylor is an upside play I'm willing to take a shot on because someone has to catch the passes in New York here with the Jets behind Garrett Wilson.
It's a classic yin-yang tight end thing you just laid out for us, and it's a beautiful play. Like, it's so well thought out. You take a Mason Taylor as your second tight end, and you pair him with a guy who you know is going to have a solid floor, like a Mark Andrews, like a George Kittle, like a Trey McBride. And you have a guy where if he pops off and you have an upside guy, then all of a sudden you have a trade asset. Yeah. You have someone who you can plug in as a flex play on a weekly basis. I mean, it's really, really smart drafting to take a high upside tight end who people aren't really sure of, but kind of has that skill set in play late in drafts. And I think you were spot on with that valuation of Mason Taylor there, Aiden.
Thank you. I really like the upside. So,
and before we move on from the Jets, I will just say this because we haven't really mentioned him yet. Garrett Wilson is the wide receiver 15 right now in ECR. I think if Justin Fields wasn't such a great value, Garrett Wilson would have been my must draft for the New York Jets. I've got him at wide receiver 12.
I'll get there in hot takes.
Beautiful. Okay, good. I'm glad we're going to talk about him because he needed to go mentioned. I know there was a lot of questions about his value, so I wanted to make sure he got mentioned, but I'm glad that we'll talk about him in a little while.
All right, so let's move up to New England. Mike Vrabel takes over, and our man, Callie Rader, had a question for us. He said, do you think with the additions on offense, do you think that Drake May will take that next step? If so, I hope after you guys play us, LOL. Big Raiders, guys. So, Aiden.
Wow.
Callie Rader, well. You seem to have a certain New England quarterback as your must draft as the ECR quarterback 16. I love the call because I think Drake May is a value as well here in 2025, but make the argument for us, Aiden.
Yeah, I know like the weapons aren't the greatest, but the offensive line is like very much upgraded. Like last year, first of all, like if they didn't upgrade it, there would be a problem. Like I don't know how you can look at that last year and say, oh yeah, no big deal. It was awful. Number 2, it sounds like Stephon Diggs is going to be ready for week 1 just in terms of the ACL recovery. I really like Kyle Williams as kind of a late run flyer. Josh McDaniels, for all the jokes about him, he does feature a slot receiver, so I think Pop Douglas is going to get peppered with targets. I'm saying here, this team isn't devoid of talent. There's a mix of veterans and youth that I really do like. And believe it or not, Hunter Henry is also a guy I like because he's just been very consistent over the years. But something that I think people aren't talking about enough is the fact that Drake May has legit like 6 to 7, 800 rushing yard upside. Like he's a very athletic, mobile QB. Yeah. He had 600 plus yards in college his last year at North Carolina. And that's like, they take rushing yards away for sacks in college if you didn't know. Right. So that's even more impressive.
Yeah, he was close. He was probably closer to 800 actual rushing yards before you take away the sack yardage and everything in college.
Mm-hmm. And fun fact, every single game he started last year, he had at least one passing touchdown in every single game he started last year. So it was amazing he was able to do anything, let alone that last year. So I'm really high on Drake May, and I think he has legit rushing upside that is flying under the radar. At least people aren't talking about it enough right now.
Yep, I'm completely in lockstep with Aiden on this one. I've got Drake May as QB12 right now, so he's a back end QB1 for me. I think he's a great value.
Yeah, dude, I'm sitting there too, and I'm looking at the deeper metrics once again on Player Profiler. A couple things that really stand out for me on Drake May. First off, fifth in pressure completion percentage is 64.1% last year, which if you can make the throws under pressure, and he had a 67% completion percentage as a rookie, then it stands to say if he has an intact pocket, he can also make those throws. But more important than that is something that I think is really interesting. In production premium, which compares the outcome of every pass attempt, carry, and target to the league average outcome in those same game situations. We're talking about yard line, down and distance, and all these different things outside of non-standard situations like 2-minute drills, clock milking, and garbage time. Drake May was 7th in production premium quarterbacks at plus 4.5. So that tells me that with everything equal, Drake May, in some arguments, was elite at times last year. Like he flashed hard. And to see that improved offense, to see the fact that they're actually going to have, with Mike Vrabel in there, a coach with a proven track record of success. Josh McDaniels, love him or hate him, has a proven track record of success as an offensive coordinator in New England. They know what they're getting with that guy. They know, and yeah, do what you will with it. It's Josh McDaniels. It's not a sexy pick, but they keep going back to the well for a reason, so they must be happy with something that he's doing.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to throw the caveat in there that most of his years of success in New England were tied to, being the offensive coordinator for the greatest quarterback of all time, which certainly helps. I don't think it's a coincidence that he got fired from every other opportunity for underachieving once Tom Brady wasn't his quarterback. But that's again, another argument for another day. I'm not here to besmirch Josh McDaniels, although I certainly could for plenty of time. But I don't want to take away from Aiden's larger point that Drake May is a great value, which I completely agree with.
Okay, worst offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith or Josh McDaniels? Go, Drew.
Yes.
Let's talk about a bust because we're going to go into the running back room for the remainder of this show. Kyle, I think where you're at right here at running back 37, I think it's an easy call. I think that there's a very good chance that he even underperforms where he's currently being drafted because of the man that Drew is about to talk about as a value, possibly taking a large percentage of that work by midseason, maybe even sooner. But talk us through Ramondre Stevenson and why we're not really a fan so far in 2025.
Yeah, and I actually had a slight battle with myself with choosing Ramondre and Stephon Diggs. I was battling back and forth. I didn't know where I wanted to go with this. Ultimately stuck with Ramondre. Because they're going so close in ADP, both of them. Diggs and Stevenson are both mid-8th round. I chose Ramondre, even with the rumors that are swirling about him handling early down work and Henderson being the receiving back. But the question is, how long is that going to last, Stevenson fumbled way too many times for my liking last year. He led the league. He wasn't handpicked by this coaching staff. Henderson was. Early second round, mind you. And that's telling. Early draft capital tells me that Henderson's going to play a lot. And now let's get into Josh McDaniels. We talked about him a little bit earlier. He likes to use multiple running backs. And Ramondre Stevenson kind of fits Josh McDaniels in a way because he likes to run power and ISO. And I believe Ramondre can run between the tackles. I'm not saying Henderson can't, Drew. Settle down. I'm not saying he can't. I know you love the guy. But it just feels to me that it's going to be a timeshare there in New England. And I want to caution even, which I'm going to let Drew talk about it, with Trey Henderson being running back 25. I think it's going to be a 50-50 split. It's going to be very tight. You're not going to see both of these backs at the same time. It's going to be one or the other, near 50-50. So if I'm out on Ramondre and Henderson is RB25, me personally, I just want to get this out there. I would rather draft people with who I think is going to have larger workloads, like two rookies I like, Quinshawn Judkins and Caleb Johnson. I would even consider Isaiah Pacheco in this range just for sheer volume alone. So I just want to caution that. I know Drew's he's going to say his piece. I'm going to give him that. But yeah, I'd just rather other running backs in that range than Ramondre Stevenson.
And Drew, you're going to talk about TreVeyon Henderson as your value player. I could just kind of see you kind of starting to get excited because you've loved this guy throughout the process. And he's explosive. He's a great pass protector. He's a great pass catcher. We know the skill set, but why at running back 25, which, as Kyle said, this might be a 50-50 backfield. So running back 25 in ECR feels a bit bullish, but at the same time, I don't hate it. So walk us through it, dude.
Yeah, no, running back 25 is not bullish enough. Look, TreVeyon Henderson is a guy that I loved in college, so I'm not really surprised to see that I'm higher than consensus now as well. That's not a surprising thing for me. For my money, Henderson was the second best running back in this class behind Ashton Genty, but obviously the NFL disagreed considering Hampton got first-round draft capital and Henderson went in a second. But for what it's worth, they only technically went 16 picks apart. So like they weren't even a full round separated between the two. But I know the first-round draft capital was much more flashy. But nonetheless, I don't have like a fancy prospect model that I can input data into it. It'll spit out a prospect score. But I do have a spreadsheet that I use to track specific production and testing metrics and compare that against thresholds that have led to fantasy success in the past. And there are 10 inputs that I look at for running back, or boxes that need to be checked essentially. And Henderson checked 8 of those 10 boxes. He wasn't an early declare, which was one that he didn't check, which in the NIL world that we live in now, I care a little bit less about than we used to in the past. As long as you were good enough to be drafted by your third year and you still choose to go back to college for financial reasons, then I don't think it matters as much. Now, if you needed that fourth year to raise your draft stock, then I start to care if you were early declare or not. But that certainly wasn't the case with Henderson. Like most folks had TreVeyon Henderson as the running back one following his junior year, ahead of guys like Jonathan Brooks and Bucky Irving and those guys in that class. TreVeyon Henderson was universally considered the RB1 before he made the announcement that he was going back to college. So it's not like he needed the junior year for his college production. And then his yards per route run, it was slightly below the threshold I'm looking for, but he was still top 10 in his class in that as well. So even though he didn't technically, his box isn't green in that section, the numbers still look good. But one of the boxes he did check was the second round draft capital that he got when the Patriots took him with the 38th overall pick, which I think that in itself speaks volumes. Like, Lord knows, I wish Jim was on here with us so that he could speak to us a little bit more, being the resident Patriots fan. But the Patriots had plenty of holes to fill, okay? And they chose to use a premium pick inside the top 50 on a running back. And I know that Ramondre's still there. We just talked about that. But this is a new coaching staff that has no ties to Ramondre. They weren't the ones that gave him the contract. He is not their guy. And I feel like the Patriots coaching staff told us exactly how they feel about Ramondre by selecting TreVeyon Henderson 38th overall. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I think Henderson is going to play 100% of the snaps, because it's unrealistic to expect a rookie to have 80, 90% snap shares. But it's going to be really hard for them to find a reason to take him off the field. He can run the ball. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. Colts GM Chris Ballard called him one of the best pass blocking running backs that he's ever evaluated coming out of college. So he doesn't have the usual rookie running back concern of, well, he's not good in pass pro. No, he checks that box as well. And then we talked about the issues with Ramondre fumbling the ball. Any of you guys know how many fumbles TreVeyon Henderson had across his entire college career?
0.
None. Nada. And so he He's going to protect the quarterback whenever he's back there in pass pro. He's going to protect the ball. He can run the ball. He's a threat in the passing game. How many weapons are we really sure about in the Patriots passing offense right now? Like, how many guys are we confident in? Like one, maybe two?
Not even one.
Like,
Henry.
like a half. Like we're confident like a half of a guy in the passing offense. Like, the Patriots were trying to give Antonio Gibson starts last year because Ramondre couldn't stop fumbling.
Then he fumbled.
And then he fumbled too. And so it's, in my opinion, there is just such a clear talent gap, like not even a close one between Henderson and Ramondre. And I think that Henderson is going to take over the backfield sooner rather than later. Now, once I get to the area of the draft where Henderson's being drafted, I would just, it's just my preference. It's the way that I build my teams. I would rather take a shot on the young running backs that I believe in, the rookie running backs that I think as the year goes on are going to build solid roles and they're going to take on more of a workload. I would rather take those guys and then package that with drafting a guy later that I know early in the season is going to have a defined role, like a Brian Robinson Jr. or a Travis Etienne, like a guy to where if Henderson does start off slow and I'm not comfortable starting him yet, I can plug in Brian Robinson Jr. until Travion Henderson gets ready. But I just think there's so much more upside going with Henderson. Whereas, like we talked about, ECR has Travion as the running back 25 right now. I've got him up at running back 19. And I'm taking him over some aging vets like James Conner, Joe Mixon, Aaron Jones. Like, I would rather take a shot on a young guy like Travion than hope that these running backs that are at or beyond the age cliff, that this isn't the year they fall off. I would just rather bet on the young guy that I believe in, that had a great college profile, that has a backfield that looks murky to some, but to me looks like a clear path for him to just take over and just out talent everybody else. And at the end of the day, in the NFL, the cream rises to the crop, whatever the saying is. Travion Henderson is going to rise to the top of this depth chart. And there's not as much doubt for me as there might be for other people in that eventually happening. So I think he's a great value. I would go as far as to say that if I would have had the must draft for the Patriots, I would have picked the same damn guy. I think Travion Henderson's an incredible talent, and I think that he's going to leave his mark sooner rather than later in this Patriots offense.
So that's the New England Patriots, guys. We got to get moving into our bold predictions really quick. But to review where we were, we had our must draft being Drake May at quarterback 16, our bust being Ramondre Stevenson at ECR running back 37, and our value being Travion Henderson at ECR 25. But as we know, before we get out of here, Fantasy and Frames does some hockey content. And in basketball, they also like to say that shooters shoot. So let's take our shot. Let's shoot our shots and make some bold predictions for the AFC East before we get out of here. Aiden, really quickly, give us your bold prediction for the Buffalo Bills.
So this one has to do with a couple wide receivers, at least the first part of it. So I believe that Josh Palmer, wide receiver 71 right now, and will out-target Keon Coleman this year, wide receiver 51. Josh Palmer's a better route runner. He's a better separator, and he gets open easier than Keon Coleman. I just feel like he's a more fantasy friendly asset and wide receiver, if that makes sense for Josh Allen. But number two, and this, like, I'm going out on a limb here. This might be like crazy. There's going to be spike weeks here. After Khalil Shakir, we talked about it spread out. There's going to be spike weeks here in terms of yards, touchdowns, whatever. So I believe that Josh Palmer will have at least 2 top 12 wide receiver 1 finishes this year due to those spike weeks. I'm going out on a limb there, but that's just what I believe right now. It's a hot take for a reason, so that's where I'm at.
I love it. I completely agree with Moggs. I think that I think Palmer slept on. I like the call.
All right, Kyle, go ahead and give us your bold prediction for the Miami Dolphins.
All right, we'll do it short and sweet. The fantasy tight end that you're going to want to own in Miami is not Darren Waller.
No.
It's Julian Hill.
Or none of them.
And I'm going to disagree and say that the fantasy tight end you want to own in Miami is Durham Smythe if he's still there.
Bears. He's on the Bears.
Oh, no.
See if he's even on the roster first.
You could go Jalen Conyers, though, the undrafted free agent that they
Pharaoh Brown.
Or Pharaoh Brown, who's a blocker.
Or none.
I miss making Durham Smythe jokes with Chris Burns back when he was here. Good times.
Oh, man. Yeah, shout out to Burnsy. That was fun.
Yeah. And so I'm going to go ahead and talk about the New York Jets. And Drew, you mentioned Garrett Wilson a little bit earlier, how you had him as wide receiver 12. Currently, he's at the ECR wide receiver 14. And my bold prediction is that at the end of the season, Garrett Wilson will finish above Brian Thomas Jr. in fantasy points per game.
Ooh, I like that.
Is that a Travis Hunter thing, or you just?
That is 100% a Travis Hunter thing. I think you're going to have some targets siphoned towards Hunter. Yep. I think Garrett Wilson has a lot less target competition. Therefore, you can see some big weeks out of Garrett Wilson that has him finish above Brian Thomas in fantasy points per game by season's end.
Yeah, and Brian Thomas Jr., a lot of his production came on deep targets and touchdowns, which are two very hard things to replicate year to year. So it's interesting. I like it.
No more Mac Jones either. So
it's actually a Diami Brown thing, is what it is. And I could see that. Like Aiden mentioned this earlier in the show, McDaniels could be on the hot seat this year. If the Dolphins start off slow, it wouldn't surprise me to see him be one of the first coaches to get canned during the year.
Mid-season. Yeah,
it wouldn't surprise me at all.
And Drew, take us out with your bold prediction for the New England Patriots.
Yeah, we got two top 12 fantasy options in this offense. Drake May and Travion Henderson are both going to finish top 12 at their position. Now, for Drake May, that's not really that hot of a take. I've already got him inside my top 12. But for Travion Henderson, running back 25 to finish top 12 at his position may be a little bit more of a hot take. I think Henderson's that special that's the kind of impact he can have on this offense. And then the Patriots almost go from worst to first in the division. I think the Bills still win the division, but I think the Patriots come in second and are a playoff team this year.
And Drew, before you get out of here, you mentioned guys like Travion Henderson and Drake May being possible top 12 values. You know where's a great place to get these top 12 values?
Where's that?
Our friends at Fast Draft, baby. Because if you go and download the Fast Draft app and use the promo code FRAMES, that will give you a first-time deposit match of up to $50 in credits. You can play the Origins games where you're drafting only rookies, talking about Travion Henderson. You can play your flex floor where you pick your favorite players for the upcoming season, get some Drake May in there, and then your D-Up game, which is just like ID Flex 4, but with IDP Fantasy Football players. Only 20-second timers, PPR formats, 6-round best ball. It's perfect for the go, and it's perfect for anybody who's trying to scratch that itch in a pinch. So, once again, the promo code is FRAMES. That first-time deposit match up to $50. Fast Draft app, start drafting faster, ladies and gentlemen. So that's the show. Boys, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Go Travion Henderson and go Breece Hall.
So we all hate Breece Hall except Drew. So.
Yeah. I have learned that I am among the Breece Hall hatership, apparently.
I wasn't until Rhett started hating on him. So
then Drew might have talked me back until he went to running back one territory, but it's okay. But next week, guys, we are going to bounce back and talk about our man Cali Raider. Lock in with us next week because we are going to the AFC West to talk about our must, our bust, and our value players. So for my boy Aiden Weingartner at A Weingartner 13, for Kyle Ziegler at KZ1180, for Drew Scott at Drew3MR, and for our boy Nate Markham, I'm Rhett Manuel.
Baby.
We are Fourth and Frames. We out. Y'all have a great night.
Toodles.